Hey, it's Bobby Cobb, and welcome to this edition of the Presence Posse. Today, we're talking about relaxing into the present moment and to see if some reductive strategies, taking away the things that are blocking us from presence, might serve us a little bit better in our quest to be more present. And joining me today is my good pal, Dr. Fred Blum. He will introduce himself right now. Go ahead, Fred. Tell us a little bit about
I think
yourself.
you've already introduced me.
Well, it occurs to me with the, because a lot of people are listening to just the audio version, our banners that we do here when we're doing it live don't do an adequate job for
They
people
don't know what they're missing.
on audio.
The level of care and effort and high tech that we put into this thing.
Yeah, there may be some folks out there that's thinking, oh, there's an audio only version. I can just listen and not have to watch.
Yeah, these two mugs. Without the women on the podcast, I mean, yeah, I kind of get it. Anyway, where were we?
Yeah, so talking about relaxing into the present moment. Last week, Danielle and I kind of began exploring this conversation. And one of the things that we noticed was that people seem to be working so hard and adding
Right.
things when already full mind in order to become, quote unquote, become present. And really all we need to do is relax and sit back. So what are some thoughts,
I mean,
initial thoughts from you around that?
there are so many actually around this because I think it's a really good topic. In that I think you really defined something that is a big stumbling block for people, and present company, at least myself included. I've done it, and the question that like I ask pretty consistently with my clients and whatnot is, is that question or that effort or that, it doesn't matter, is that whatever coming from the perspective of your ego or your true self? Now, spoiler alert, it's almost always going to be ego. But that's okay, because the point isn't to be like, oh, I messed up again. It's just to keep catching it, catching yourself in real time. And one of the things the ego loves to do is to strive, to seek, because the ego, the very nature of the ego as fear and insecurity, never feels okay. It never really feels okay with itself. I mean, you can like have some degree of functionality in the world, but if you dig deep enough underneath all of that, it still feels, I mean, that's what the ego is. It's a fundamental feeling of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not, something along those lines. And so that's how the ego is going to approach spirituality or presence. It's going to think there's something wrong with me. I'm not present, or I'm not present enough. Enough, right? And so coming from that perspective of what I call problem solving, now it's going to say, okay, how do I do it? How do I become more present? How many books can I read? How many hours can I meditate? All that kind of thing, which is all fine, of course. It's like, don't kill the messenger. The messenger is the books or meditation or whatever. It's just that if you're using it with this underlying, probably hidden agenda to fix yourself, I'm not saying that none of that stuff will be of any value, but it's not going to get you to the point of real presence,
Yeah. And I've seen that with the financial advisors that I work with. They are by nature, I think all, part of the human condition, the human experience is that we are conditioned into becoming these goal-seeking organisms, and hypnosis of social conditioning is bombarding us all the time with a fear-based message that you're not enough. That, if you look at every advertisement, it's you plus whatever it is that they're selling equals the happier, finally satisfied and content you until the next thing comes along. And with financial advisors, they'll set a revenue goal for the year. And for the ones that hit that hit their annual goal in September or October, they invariably are wanting to do one of two things. Either try to find out how high is high, how much can I push this? How high can I?
And there are times when, of course, that's fine.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the other thing that they like to do, if it's like a number that they're happy with, maybe they're getting to the point in their life where they're working on work-life balance and they begin to wonder, I wonder if I can do this, but only have to work 4 days or 3 days a week. How
I
much
like that idea.
Automate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
can I get
sometimes
there faster. Can I go higher? Can I be stronger? That's so conditioned into us. And I can't remember whose song it was. I think it might have been Janet Jackson, but I can remember when it came out because it became like the favorite anthem of every sales manager I knew. And the song had the line, "What have you done for me lately?" Don't rest on your laurels. And that is, I think, one of the reasons that type of music resonates is it taps so deeply into our conditioning, and to the degree that we can begin to recognize that is our conditioning, and not our true self, that begins to create a little space.
That's exactly why I wanted people to slow down, and to notice this is my ego running the show, and it's painful, and it's to see it. It can be, I don't want to overstate it, but it can be uncomfortable to see that. Certainly the ego, I call that guards at the gate. The ego doesn't want to be seen. It wants to operate in the background. And so what it does is, I say it posts guards at the gate. Like, as you're getting close to realizing that's just my ego, it'll put something on the, like right at the threshold of where you really are going to see this. And usually it'll show up like fear, some distracting emotion, typically, that'll pull you away from crossing that threshold, but if you cross into it, you begin to see, oh yeah, there's a deeper place of presence that I can come from. I was listening to our friend Alan Watts. I guess I'm sure most people listening just know Alan Watts was British philosopher in the 70s, I guess, 60s and 70s. And I think he's brilliant and kind of entertaining. And he was just saying today, I heard a little recording today, and he said, it's fine to have goals, but the only way to set goals and enjoy your life is to live in the present. And I thought that was an interesting way to look at that. You can have a goal, but you have to live here now. And if you don't, if you're looking only towards the goal, and have I hit the goal yet? And what's the next goal and the next goal? That's just not, we're existing, but we're not really living. Which of course the ego doesn't like to hear that either. So you said the theme of today, or at least a theme of today, is about less.
Yeah, looking at it as opposed to being in the present moment or being mindful or any of those things that seekers are typically striving for. Most people who approach that, and the traditional literature that you often see, is, we get into these practices that you've got to do yoga every day. You've got to meditate twice a day. You've got to focus on your breathing all day, every day. You got to have a certain amount of movement and the right diet. You need to be a vegetarian. And, there's all of these things.
And God forbid you should think an impure thought.
God forbid. Yeah, exactly. It's like the road to derailed from the present is littered with all of these things that we have to add to the process. And I do a meditation at my spiritual center that I go to every Wednesday night. We've got a group that gathers. There's usually somewhere between 4 and 8 most nights that kind of gather together, and we just meditate for an hour together. And I'll often give a little bit of guidance or instructions or just asking questions. And I had offered the idea of just stopping and checking in and see how you're doing. And I challenged them to do that 15 times a day, to just sometime during the day, stop to check in and see how you're doing, how present you are, how stressed you're feeling, and just overall on a completely subjective scale, where are you? If like one is bliss.
But not like a judgment, right? Just a noticing.
Yeah. And not really having to do anything necessarily about it, but just taking as it comes and just noticing. And then we were
I
planning.
actually have an alarm that goes off to remind me. And it was recommended to me, and it made sense that it should be a random alarm, not like every hour, because that way the brain doesn't know how to prepare for it.
Yeah, in fact, I've noticed that, because I used to recommend people set an alarm, and just like that, and I would say set it for 45 minutes and just notice how you're doing. And if you're stressed out, change it, make it a little shorter. If you're feeling good, it's okay to make it a little bit longer, and just kind of adjust it how it goes. And I started playing around with there's a meditation timer called Insight meditation timer, and it will allow you to do exactly that. It'll allow you, it is a paid app, but it's like $5 or something for lifetime, not for the month. And you can say, I want to set 20, or pick any number, alarms during the day, and I want them to occur randomly.
Oh, you can do that. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I had to find another timer.
And
that's
that
nice to know, because I recommend it to people a lot.
That that is there was a big difference. I started to play around with that again, and just noticing just how easily I can unconsciously begin to notice when 45 minutes is coming up. And there's a tendency, and this is ego again, but there's a tendency to like, okay, that bell is coming up, so let me chill out a little bit, just so I'll be able to, have a low score, a good score, based on the way that we're doing this scale. So I like the randomness of it. But going back to the meditation, I asked people how they were doing with that. And one guy had like the dream report that, since I've been doing this, I just noticed that I get into the flow at work, and my days are just flying by. I mean, I start working, I get lost in what it is that I'm doing. Those alarm goes off, and they wake me up, but I just have been experiencing flow all day. So
that's super cool.
Ego says, "Wow, yeah, great report." And another person that was there said, "Well, I was doing pretty good with it, but then on Monday, this is Wednesday, on Monday, I found out my brother had been shot." And that kind of took me off my game a little bit. And, huge pattern interrupt for all of the people that were there.
Yeah.
And we started talking about it, and it was like, oh my goodness, what happened? And, he told this story, and it was pretty intense, and he was sharing all of that. And before, we were about to go into meditation, I said, okay, just check on that scale that we've been talking about. Where are you? And, everybody was pretty amped up, obviously, whether it was from compassion or empathy, or, just viscerally living the story as he's telling it. And so everybody was pretty amped up. So we started the meditation. And in that, I just suggested, just follow your breath and just relax and notice as you breathe out. And, I'm doing all kinds of kind of hypnotic, trancey type talk to guide them into peace. And in about 3 minutes, I just dinged this little bell and said, without reporting it out loud, just remember it. Where are you now? And I think there were 6 people there that night. I'm not 100% certain of that. But of the people that were there, everybody noticed, and we talked about this afterwards, that they had dropped significantly just from the act of following their breath and relaxing and letting go and just reducing. And I've noticed there was a switch I had several years ago where, like, peace of mind and tranquility and clarity finally became more of the norm for me. And in that, I began to notice those quote unquote negative feelings as being abnormal, and that's when I started thinking of them as the rumble strips on the highway of life. And those became the pattern interrupt. It took a little bit of noticing, not really training, just really noticing, just paying attention to it. And all of a sudden, that gave me the opportunity to stop and go, okay, what's going on here? And what I noticed in my own experience and what many clients have reported as similar things was I noticed that when I was experiencing any sort of quote unquote negative emotion, I was time traveling. I
You were
was
what?
worried about time traveling. I
Oh
was
yeah.
worried about something in the future that may happen. And it may have happened. Those things may have happened. But they weren't happening yet. And the mental state that I was in at that moment, I could just tell I wasn't prepared to handle it, because as we get anxious and angry or frustrated or insecure or any of those so-called emotions, it seems to me that simultaneously our access to resources kind of start to dry up, and we just have less options. It's only those neural networks that Malcolm's always reminding us about, the information superhighways that we've created in our brains. Those are the only roads that are still available to us, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. It's conditioning for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, back to the thing we were saying earlier about letting go and relaxing into what's already present. So a lot of this stuff we're talking about, the seeking and the striving, and all you said that whole list of how we have to purify ourselves and do all these things in order to be in the present. That's called the progressive path.
Right.
And there are a great many people on the progressive path, and it is a legitimate path. And then the opposite of I don't want to say the opposite, but another alternative is the direct path. And the direct path says you are already that for which you have been seeking. And so the direct path says there's nothing you need, literally nothing you need to do in order to be who you already are. And it is the eternal game of the ego to try and keep that from us. And not because the ego is evil. The ego is the identity that we need some level of identity just to function in the world.
Yeah.
And
right, to make our way in a community.
Right, with in any version of a community. And the truth is, like you were speaking earlier about peace becoming more and more your baseline, something like that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed shifting for me over the years is, like, as I have kind of deepened more for myself into the present, is that I just find the different expressions of people's identity so interesting and fun to watch. And, it's not like it's a pathology or something that we have to eradicate. your identity, is a very unique and interesting thing. Now, if you don't know that it's just like a mask that you put on in order to function in society with all the other identities, that can be problematic because now you forgot that you're just playing a role. You're playing this role of um, of being limited, you know, of pretending that you're like this physical body and mind, and that's the game sort of that we're playing. We're infinite consciousness pretending to be finite form, and when we begin to really get that, and so the really only way that I know to get it is that we learn to dance back and forth. So you have you learn, and this is a bit of a skill. So I mean, in this sense, maybe it takes a little bit of time, and that is to learn to notice the ever-present space of infinite awareness or peace or love that is who we really are. It's a skill to be able to, it's like to somehow turn down the noise of the ego or something. That's probably not the best way to say it because I don't think you have to do it that way. I always believe you enter into your experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I actually kind of want to push back on the skill because I think it can be a skill. You can learn to quiet your mind, and there's lots of practices that teach that. And at the same time, when you have those awe-inspiring moments, if you're seeing
right, there
something
it
as
is.
small as a beautiful sunset or something as beautiful as the birth of a new child, it automatically happens. Our mind gets so quiet. And I had that last year. I think I've told the story on this podcast of diving with the manta rays in Hawaii and being so close to these giant fish that have 15 feet wingspans, giant manta rays, and close enough that they were like a couple of times their uh, wings kind of just scraped against my face or my shoulders. And it could have been scary. I mean, their mouths are so big they could have swallowed my head, but they're not interested in eating people. And it was an awesome experience. And I was like so in the moment that it was just like 90 minutes of wow.
Mm.
So while it is a skill and it can be cultivated, it is also, I think, a symptom or a result of the deeper peace and settling into our true self and our true
I
identity.
could not agree more. I mean, and that's the paradox. You even heard it when I was saying it, like, well, it's
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
a skill. It's, and yet there are a couple of things. So, it's like, yes, it's present. It's like it is literally the very definition of effortless is to be what you already are, you know?
yeah,
Um, and we can say with still a high degree of belief or certainty that there are neural pathways. You talked about information superhighways earlier that that are already built. We've built over decades that take us away from that true self, that take us deeper into the identity and the whatever aspect of the identity we're operating from. And that circuitry is very powerful because the brain doesn't just like have an opinion
right.
about what kind of circuitry you should build. It just says, we're doing that a lot. I'm going to make it easier to do that by creating more and more neural pathways. And so, you practice being an ego for 40, 50, 60 years, and you're going to have a lot of circuitry. So now you say, I want to now have that experience of presence that I had with the manta rays. And I can't swim with manta rays all the time. That's
Sadly true.
impractical. So, okay. because the manta rays, what they were able to do, the incredible novelty of that experience, and probably so many other things about the way just nature is so incredibly whole and complete, like I say, when you're walking in the woods, the stream doesn't argue with the trees or the air for your attention. It's all just one seamless whole. um, and so maybe when you're in the water with the manta rays, it's like what it does is it overrides that normal conditioning. So you have a moment where the ego, the identity disappears, and you're at peace with them in the moment.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that it didn't remain that way forever.
Correct.
Yeah, and I'm sure, by the way, that the very doing of it, just like meditation, already began to change the nervous system.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But so again, by skill, I simply mean that the more we play with the game, having an alarm go off, there's a million ways that we can play the game of just coming into the present right here, right now, and build a few more neural pathways so that it becomes more and more of a natural thing. You said that earlier too. Like more and more the natural state is such. Now, skill, did it take time? Those are just things we could debate all day. But there is the letting go. There is the having less, not more aspect of this that you spoke about before, that I think we miss.
Yeah, and I read somewhere, and I don't actually know if it's true, but I read somewhere that humans are the only animal that when we are confused and uncertain, we speed up.
Oh, that's interesting.
We get, what's going on here? What are we doing? How do we fix this? We tend to amp up. Whereas if you look at a lot of most other animals, a good example that many people can relate to is a cat that for the first time goes outside. If it's been a house cat and it makes its way outside, as soon as it hits the grass and it feels something new, it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And it's looking at its environment, and it's checking and seeing and seeking and waiting and just allowing things to become. Whereas our conditioning, I used to love the show Modern Family when it was on, and every time the one guy, Phil, would screw up, his wife would always say, "What's the plan, Phil? You got us into this trouble. How are you going to get us out again?" And that's conditioning. We are conditioned to assess blame. That part of it, a lot of what we do is just the desire to say, it wasn't my fault. I didn't do it. Or I'm a victim of circumstances and therefore I'm not to blame. That's like an instant conditioned response. Whereas to the degree that we can incorporate a little bit more room and allow and admit that it was our fault, if it was our fault, that tends to be very freeing and just allows your mind to relax.
Well, and also how much we probably have to relax just to even begin to allow that to happen.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
And you get so, I mean, aha moments, I think, are an interesting metaphor for this, because pretty much everybody can relate to having an aha moment.
Right.
And most people, when we ask them, tell us about an aha moment, it invariably is, I was working on something, I was frustrated, I got to the point where I just had to push away, I was driving myself crazy, and then I went and did something else, took a shower, washed the dishes, pet the dog, took the garbage out, worked in the garden a little bit, went for a walk. Something where the mind was just allowed to focus on something else. The mental RPMs that we had racing for the moment, we get back down closer to an idle where our engine's just running, it's on, but it's not revving. And boom, what happens? Here comes that flash of insight, that new burst of intuition, that aha moment, often when we least expect it. And generally, it's delivered with the knowing that it's the right thing to do. It gets us the head smack. Oh my God, why didn't I think about that earlier?
Yeah, it's the more pressure and stress that we feel. For most people, I mean, this is probably definitely not 100%, but for most of us, we're going to tend to think more and more linearly. What's what's the plan, whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when we're looking that way, this kind of tunnel vision, which has a certain utility to it also, but it also by design has us miss the big picture. Because this, especially from a fight or flight perspective, which honestly, most people are walking around with like low-level fight or flight, like that emergency mode of your nervous system, and they don't even realize it anymore. They don't realize it because it's just become normal to be that way. They think that's the way you're supposed to breathe.
Yeah.
I am breathing, and they're barely breathing, just a little bit in their upper chest. Not to make fun of these people, I'm just saying it's very easy to be that checked out if you don't have someone that's helping you and supporting you in this. And so when we're in that fight or flight mode, we create that tunnel vision because that's what allows us to focus on the problem. We have to solve this. We're running or fighting for our lives. And so what it's designed to do is keep out the distractions. But that also will prevent us from seeing the big picture. And maybe the solution to our problem or our challenge is like over here somewhere. I can't really see where am I pointing, but you get the idea. Yeah. Instead of right here. And so the ability, I mean, if nothing else, like this is why I love the alarm game that we talked about, is that if nothing else in that moment, we can take a breath. We could sort of bring ourselves back out of that maybe habitual fight or flight doing mode that we get caught up in. And we could begin to really settle in. That's where those aha moments come from. I call that an insight.
Yeah.
Where it comes from silence. It comes from
within
something that we don't already know, as opposed to referencing the past database of all the ways we've screwed this up before, and so, what was the name? What do we call this meeting today?
Relaxing into presence.
Relaxing into the presence. Into the present. It's like, it really does. It just starts with being able to take a couple of breaths and take inventory and say, how am I doing? And then you could see there's one aspect of like who I'm being in this moment. And for me, I like to go into the body that's calling most loudly for attention. Some people like to shut that part up.
Yeah.
So you can get back to obsessing.
Yeah.
And
we're so conditioned
right
for that. I mean, you think of all of the little axioms that we have: power through, suck it up, fake it till you make it, no pain, no gain. That's all telling us to ignore all of the information that is attempting to guide us in the moment, and suck it up and focus on the mission at hand and just keep going. It's not how often you get knocked down,
right?
How often you get back up again.
And so to be able to slow down, and this is hard for some people. Yeah. It takes discipline. And some people it's just going to be like to slow down and to notice that tension or that buzzing mind. And to me, again, to notice how whatever part of my body I become aware of in that moment. And this is where the skill part comes in, is to learn how to be with that contraction and to just little by little relax into it, really allowing it to relax, allowing that part of ourselves to relax and to just stop clenching so tightly. That's an opportunity that will almost always lead to a deeper experience of the present. And the more we practice it, it's like peeling the onion. The deeper and deeper layers of that contraction we're going to encounter. And it's really, it doesn't have to be that hard. You know, it could just be noticing what's happening right now, making room for it exactly the way it is. Allow it to relax. You want to maybe taking a few breaths, whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
And do that 15 times a day for a month. And then check in and see how you're doing.
Yeah. And if one does that 15 times a day for a month from now, the world will look completely different because
and
you
people will be
now,
asking you, what's different about you?
Yeah. You're saying people will ask that.
But yeah,
You've changed. You look
what's
happier.
what is it different? Did you
Yeah.
are you wearing your hair different? You know, what is it? You know, people are not that observant often, but you know, they'll see something's different. They'll know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, people who are doing that, this is going to be a brief commercial for both of us, really. Then when you come down and you have a conversation with Bobby or I or any, you know, Miriam or Danielle or Jan, it's going to be a very different conversation because you've gotten to know yourself. You've built your self-awareness to a point where now you could do some really deep work. You know, and I just think that what more important thing do we have to do in our lives? Or what? Forget that. I don't want to make it sound like a moral judgment. What's going to provide the biggest payoff in our lives? What's going to give us the greatest bang for our buck in terms of truly being happy and peaceful? I can't think of anything more than just learning to relax more and more into the present, into presence.
Yeah. People who cultivate the skill to the degree that they're cultivating a skill or the realization
Mm-hmm.
to the point that they're cultivating a realization or perhaps a little bit of both, feel like I do now that it's, you know, more active in my life. It's like a superpower that you can, and, you know, going back to that fight or flight response and the natural myopic view that is developed, that's really part of the beauty of the design of the system, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I can remember a time I was out hiking and I slipped and I slid down the side of a hill, and it was a pretty steep hill and there were lots of rocks on the hill. And the first couple of times that I tried to move, I slid more. And, you know, like I would slide down another 3 feet and then I would try to climb back up again and I would slide down another few feet. And I was very fearful. I don't believe I was actually ever in danger, but I certainly felt that I felt unsafe and unsecure and at risk. And I got to the point where I could reach up and touch a rock. And I got to the point where I could tell if it was wedged in enough that I could grab that rock, or if it was so light, you know, sometimes it was just knocking it and it would slide down and I would grab another one, and it took me, I only had to crawl about 30 feet, but it took about 15 minutes to crawl that. But there was a time that everything zoomed down, and I was very aware of all of these rocks, and I started to make progress. And there was suddenly a sense that I'm going to be okay. I've got this, and I can make my way back up again. And I had friends there that, they could have gotten somebody with a rope to help me out if it was necessary. But just the internal experience of that moment, from those first couple of slips where I went down and my heart was racing, my breathing, I'm sure my heart was probably going about 130 a minute, and my respiration, I'm sure I was probably on the verge of hyperventilating, and just somewhere along the line. And I think because my body said, all right, you're at real risk now, so don't think about anything other than right now.
Mhm.
And, then when I got up there, I sat for a while, I started breathing deeply, and suddenly I started to relax. And those deep breaths, maybe you can talk a little bit about, with your chiropractic background, some of the physical things that are happening in our body as we shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic. And I know you've talked a little bit about the vagus nerve and the
Yeah,
importance of
vagus
that.
nerve is critical in this
Yeah.
whole
So
thing.
can
And
you fill in some of those blanks, and just give a little
yeah,
bit
I
of.
mean, without getting super technical about it here, the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in your body. It goes from the brain all the way down through the spine. I don't know where it goes to, but very far down. And it controls a lot of our organ responses, and it's very tied to the fight or flight response. And what we call vagal tone is directly, that's another term for this fight or flight versus sort of alert state that we can be in. One of the easiest and direct ways to affect the vagus nerve is through breathing. Slow, conscious breathing increases, what you want to do is increase vagal tone. And so slow breaths, very simple stuff. Like most people probably know, one version is to make your exhale longer than your inhale.
Yeah.
Another one is like a 4-7-8 breath. Breathe in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. Box breathing. Breathe in maybe for 2, hold for 2, exhale for 2, hold for 2 on the exhale, and then start again. And you could, change those numbers. Those kind of things. They teach you to be more in control, ultimately, of your physiology, to not be caught in the automatic fight or flight, the conditioned response that it's very easy to get stuck in. That's why I like body-based practices, honestly, because that's how we see it. That's how we really learn what it is that we're talking about. Is by noticing it the way it physically feels. I mean, maybe another really direct way is what I've been saying before, is just to learn to, as we're breathing, to be present with the experience exactly the way it is.
Yeah.
And
that, I will say, does require, at least in my own experience and that of my clients, that requires some training.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. To sit and be nervous and recognize I'm nervous, and maybe do a little, why am I nervous? What part of me is actually nervous? You can do that as well. But just to sit there and go, okay, I'm nervous. Now what?
Now
And,
what?
and
Yeah.
then do some of that breathing. And like any of those breaths, I like all of those breaths. One thing that people will notice as they begin to practice that, if you start with the box, for example, and do 2 in, 2 hold, 2 out, 2 hold, uh, with your lungs empty, very quickly your body's going to begin to adjust and will request that your inhalations become longer and your holds become longer and your exhales become longer. And, doing that, it's easy to get up to where, if you're doing 5 on each part of the box, now you're only taking 3 breaths per minute, as opposed to normal is about 14 or 15.
Right.
Panic is about 25 to 30.
Yeah.
So we are kind of reverse engineering a release of all of the really yummy,
and creating new neural pathways.
yeah.
So that you
And from NLP terms, we can also be creating a trigger.
Yeah.
Because
An anchor.
An
That's
anchor,
a little different. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody who smokes, oftentimes every time they get on the telephone with a friend, their natural normal response after picking up the phone and saying hello is to light one up, because I'm talking to my buddy on the phone and that's what I do. And so that becomes an anchor to launch that behavior, and that anchor gets fired off when the phone rings. Similarly, as we practice that, any type of restorative or relaxing breath work, where we're setting an anchor that is just instructing our body and our mind and our connection to source to a new neural network that is like, oh, okay, I know what to do here. We're supposed to relax and calm down. And there's something I've read that as we, like that breath that you talked about, where we're breathing in for 1 and breathing out for 2, or breathing in for 7 and breathing out for 14, just twice whatever you're doing, that emptying of the lungs is kind of like really hits that vagus nerve, right?
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff there, and there's different aspects of lung volume. I don't know that we need to get into all that, but yeah, there's it actually makes me maybe want to go back and study some of that stuff again. I haven't looked at the vagus nerve stuff in a while, but it's just useful. It's useful to know that human beings are wired in a certain way, and there are ways to use this tool called a body effectively, and there are ways to not use it so effectively. And you can. Most people don't really get that kind of training, unfortunately. Athletes get it to some degree, which is definitely good, but it's not exactly what I'm talking about usually. Like, just, you don't have to be an athlete. You just have to know that this is a body, that it's designed to move in a certain way, that it's designed to breathe, that it's designed to not carry a great deal of tension, just to name a few. And when we learn to use our body in the way that it was designed, it's another access into the present. The founder of the particular branch of this martial arts system that I studied, it's a Russian martial art, I probably mentioned it here before, called Sistema. Michael Rabko just died recently, like in the last couple of weeks. And he was just extraordinary in just this. He was kind of a big man, and he just exuded this sense of peace and well-being. And he just always had this almost cherubic smile on his face as he was like just doing. And he wasn't one of these like jump up spinning kind of martial art kind of people. He would be just so simple and direct in the way he would manage, forces coming at him. But the point is, what he used to say is, the experience of good movement is joy. And so when we learn to use our bodies well, and to breathe and to move and to relax that unnecessary tension, it brings us into the present. And when we experience the present through the body, the experience is joy. At least that's my idea of it. When we experience it through the mind, we might experience it differently. We might experience it as peace or love.
Yeah.
Maybe through the heart is love. We could play with all those kind of things. But different areas of the body have different, I like to think of them as like facets of being. Love is a facet of being, clarity, peace, joy. I think might be expressed through different parts of the body. That'd be a fun thing to explore.
Yeah, that would. It would. So, with a new client, if I was a new client of yours and you were introducing me to a pattern interrupter, checking your breathing or doing whatever, how would you introduce me to that practice?
I don't, it's not one way that I do it with everyone,
Okay.
but sometimes I actually take people through an exercise. It's a very simple exercise where they pick an object in the room that they can focus on, and they begin to systematically expand their awareness of the space around the object
Mm.
until, and
So
you might say,
tapping
okay,
into peripheral vision a little bit.
no, you don't have to see it at all. You just
Okay.
become aware of it. So,
Ah,
like, I'm staring at a lamp over there, and I become aware of the space around the lamp, maybe just a foot, and then a little more, and then I become aware of the space in this room that the lamp exists within. And then I can expand that and become aware of the space in this house that the lamp exists in, the space in this neighborhood. And I continue to let my awareness, and this is a very interesting thing that a human being can do, is we can be aware of space without actually having to see it. So with just a little bit of, I can be aware of this lamp, I can be aware, again, because this is our natural state, I can be aware that that lamp exists within infinite space.
mm.
And I can get to this place, even when I guide somebody through it, it probably doesn't take 2 minutes. And it just profoundly shifts. Like, they say the reference point for most people of being a human being is a certain level of tension right behind the eyes,
Yeah.
right? That's where the ego kind of like, anchors itself. And with just a little bit of that feeling of expansion into infinity, that tension behind the eyes really begins to soften, and the sense of me as a separate identity, a separate thing in the world, becomes much less compelling. So that's a fun exercise. Hopefully, if I explained it well enough, people can play around with that on their own. And that's one thing. Like, if somebody seems like they're really having a hard time dropping into the present, I'll take them through some practice like this. That's an easy one. There's other ones, obviously, that can pretty directly take someone into an experience of at least of slowing down and being peaceful. And as we do that, then against that background, it becomes easier to become aware of your experience. Something that might have felt a little overwhelming before. So I think, is that answering your question?
Yeah,
Okay,
it
good.
does. And that last part is exactly what I was describing, on that the rock slide that I was
Oh yeah.
involved with, that moment that it was just and I don't even remember it specifically enough to be able to point and say XYZ happened, and then it was just somewhere along the way a shift came, and it was just all of a sudden I could feel which rocks I could trust to hold, and which rocks were going to just go sliding down.
It's like an animal, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, a
They're,
mountain goat. I mean, have you ever seen a mountain goat? Oh my God!
yeah,
Like at the Grand Canyon or someplace. I mean, these things, they look like they're walking up a sheer wall. It's bizarre.
yeah. We have
Uh,
Dall sheep
oh yeah,
here
same
in
thing.
Alaska, and they will run. There's cliffs that we have here that go up 5,000 feet.
Uh,
And there's all kinds of rocky outcroppings up and down the thing, and they will sit there and jump like 10 or 15 feet onto a platform and land and stick the landing. Like, what?
yeah, and it's just because they're exactly what you're describing, because they just are so in the present, and I mean, with a brain that is a fraction of the level of our development, you know, as humans, uh, they can do the incredibly complex math to make that kind of a jump safely.
Yeah, and somebody I was listening to, I think it was a one of the science and non-duality talks a while ago, and it was like a physicist or a mathematician or something that was saying if we could describe accurately how we know when it's safe to cross a street when a car is coming, if it's safe to pull out, all of the mathematical calculations that we have to be able to tell
Right,
how fast it's coming, how long it's going to take us to make the turn in front of them. And if we were able to do that, that would be like a master's in math
right.
level of knowledge. But innately, we have that knowing to say this is safe and this is not. And, there's a gray area there, I guess, along the way. But yeah, for the most part, those are skills that we have that as we get a little bit more in the present, have the opportunity to flourish. And we
And
can,
this is where getting out of the way is the key. Um, you know, in Tai Chi, which is the other martial art that I study, there's a beautiful saying called "invest in loss," and particularly in this exercise called push hands, where it's a partner drill, and you're lightly touching hands with another person, and that through that contact point or however you can maneuver, you're trying to basically capture that person's balance. Um, and invest in loss, so the ego doesn't like to lose. That's obvious. And so it will do all kinds of stuff that is completely opposite of good Tai Chi in order not to lose. It'll speed up, it'll use physical force when Tai Chi is all about relaxing, it'll get rigid to avoid losing. And if you're a skilled Tai Chi person, the more rigid your opponent is, the easier they are to defeat, you know? So investing in loss means, if you don't have a solution that won't violate your current level of skill in Tai Chi, just lose. Just let them push you. They're your friend. You're not at the edge of a cliff, you know? Lose and then learn. But if I tightened up and therefore my physical strength, they couldn't beat me because I was too strong, well, I just reinforced something that I'm trying not to reinforce.
all right.
So we look for places in life, if we want Tai Chi to actually be something that we learn from, like we become a better person rather than just better martial artists, we look for places in life. Where can I invest in loss? Where can I let the other person be right? Where can I let the other person go in traffic, even though I'm in a hurry?
Yeah.
It's just like the 15 times you pause a day. Those moments in our day where we learn to invest in loss and a million other little games. That's how I think we really become close. We move closer and closer to who we really are.
And letting go of a lot of that conditioning that is ever present in our lives. That's the whole thing about that timer interrupt whether you're doing it randomly or, setting it for every 35 or 45 minutes, whichever, pardon my eyes watering. The benefit of that is you begin to see your conditioning. And if the way that I do it is when the alarm goes off, the instruction is that's a cause for a pause. Just stop for a second, check in, see how you're doing. And I have a completely subjective scale where 1 is bliss, 99 is you're ready to run from the room and assume the fetal position in a dark corner and let the storm blow over. Where are you on that scale? And just noticing. And two things that people notice in just a few days of incorporating that practice into their daily routine is, one is we go up and down a lot all the time. And, people have a tendency to say, I've been depressed for the last 5 months. And, if it's somebody that we know, we can say, well, that's not true. I was hanging out with you last Saturday night and we were laughing our ass off and having a great time.
Right.
And you weren't depressed then. And they're like, well, yeah, okay, I wasn't then. But our tendency to generalize can sometimes make it feel as though that's the case. And what we think and feel very often we make real. So we begin to notice that it's really much more variable than we've been conditioned to understand. And the second thing is, if you don't like that number, if you're like, man, I'm anxious and I'm on the verge of overwhelm here, and you just practice that breathing. First of all, notice your breath, and odds are good, as you pointed out earlier, your breath's going to be shallow. It's going to be in your chest, and it may not yet be on the verge of hyperventilation, but it's traveling down that road. And just the act of taking conscious control of your breath, which of all of our bodily functions is the easiest for us to turn over to automatic, or take conscious control and play a little in the Wim Hof world or the pranayama world. And then we can notice how easily we can shift that experience. And going back to the meditation, when my friend's brother had been shot, I rang that bell and just asked them to check in, although just keep meditating. But most people in their own subjective scale had gone down, had become calmer by 30 points. And, it's interesting to note just how effortlessly we can control our experience if we have the awareness and the intention to do that.
And to just relax into our experience.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, we are
again.
Top of the hour. And so this will be a good place to wrap it up. Fred, before we go, why don't you share with folks how they can get a hold of you? And
Sure. I'm easy. If anything I've said today is interesting or intriguing to you, if you'd like to explore some of these ideas a little bit more deeply, then reach out to me. The easiest way right now is probably just to email me at drfred, DRFRED, at energyrichliving.net. That's the easiest way. You're also welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's about the only social media I use with any consistency anymore. So you can find me there. I post a lot of, I think, cool stuff on there. So that's me. Yes. And I say this a lot, but anyone who would like to explore these ideas, especially listeners from this show, I'm very happy to waive my normal fee for that first conversation, so we can really dive into some coaching during that conversation, and we'll do it at no cost, so you can really get a sense of what this is like.
Yeah, I do the same thing, and I think that is both important, and it is also works real well for the client, because this type of work can be sort of mentally intimate. You know, if you're opening up and sharing, so you want to have a certain level of comfort with the
Right.
coach that you're working with. And from my point of view, I like to have the initial conversation as well, because I really want to get to an understanding of where the person is and where they want to go, and you know, hopefully kind of map out a little bit of a path to get there and all of that
Yeah.
type of stuff. So yeah, that's really important. So we both have that as part of our practice, that the first initial exploratory conversation, there's no fee involved with that, because we want to make sure that we can help you, and we want to make sure that you feel comfortable with us as your coach and your guide for that part of your journey.
I
And
am definitely not for everyone.
nor am I. Yeah,
I'm,
there's I know in every time I ever give a public speech that has some sort of a comment thing, I know there's going to be a few people that in there that, for whatever reason, even though I feel like I'm a lovable little squishy ball of energy, of yummy energy, I rub people the wrong way. And
well, I mean, I'm not even saying, you know, it has to be like some kind of visceral annoyance. I
yeah,
mean, it may just be
yeah,
two puzzle pieces that you like, a puzzle piece and the whole don't fit.
yeah,
Uh, I'm good with that.
that's true. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. So, well, on behalf of the posse, we'd like to thank everybody for joining in. We broadcast every Monday at the same time we are now, wherever you are, 7 o'clock in the evening, Greenwich Mean Time on Monday. I think that's 2 o'clock Central and 11 o'clock AM here in Alaska. And in Europe, we've got folks there as well, 8 or 9 PM, depending on which time zone
Yeah,
you're
we
in.
have quite the, yeah, I mean, we're all over the map here.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And
So,
we have been releasing these podcasts on every podcatcher that you typically get podcasts from. So you can find a lot of our back talks there as well. I think we've got about 35 of them up now, and we're coming real close to it being our 100th episode. So
wow.
we've been doing this for a couple of years now. So one of the favorite parts of my
And
week.
pretty consistently.
Yeah, pretty much. Just a few, but not too many. Well,
Well, in the spirit of accepting everything as it comes, thank you, everyone, for listening or not listening, as the case may be.
indeed, we will see you next time.
All
Ciao
right.
for now.
Thanks, everyone.